everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Sports Department Podcast. Today, we're talking the NBA News Roundup. A lot to talk about. I'm Stephen Bologna, joined alongside Jesse Norman, and we are currently filming this on Monday, July 5th. The finals between the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns will be starting tomorrow in that 7-game set. We are excited for it. We just recently had the NBA Draft Lottery. The Pistons are holding the number one pick there. Couple star point guards potentially might be on the way out with Damian Lillard, but with the potential looming threat of requesting a trade out of Portland. The 76ers, will they keep or trade Ben Simmons? And just an overall playoff wrap-up. But first, Jesse, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty excited to talk about the NBA. Haven't done that in a little while. Yeah, a lot of interesting things. I don't think anybody predicted a Suns Bucks final. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, it must hurt for you to see. I just want to get this out of the way because, the Brooklyn Nets, what a game 7 that was against the Milwaukee Bucks. KD is a foot size too big, steps the foot on the line, and then they lose it in overtime. So I want to hear your thoughts on the Nets and not making it to the finals.
I mean, look, anybody who said it was championship or bust this year, I disagreed with very heavily throughout. This is the first year they were put together. They weren't even put together in the offseason. The Rockets made sure of that. They allegedly had a deal, then pulled back, only to then go back onto the deal that was originally agreed to. But that didn't happen until mid-season. I'm looking forward to what Sean Marks is going to do next year. The free agency is interesting. It hurt when it went down, obviously, but I think it's been the case for pretty much every team in the playoffs of you couldn't keep up with the injuries. It was too much. It got to the point Nash was playing 6 guys. I mean, KD didn't sit for games at a time. They pushed, they gave everything they had. And at the end of the day, I don't think anybody can truly think that the Nets weren't the best team, at least in the Eastern Conference. I mean, you've seen them when they were playing, even without Harden and just had Kyrie Irving, they were blowing the tires off of the Bucks. It took Kyrie going down. Kyrie went down, James Harden playing on a grade 2 hamstring that normally takes 6 weeks to recover from. And they took overtime in a game 7. So, you can feel bad about it, but I don't know. I think injuries were the biggest factor for not only the Nets, but I mean, you look across the entire league, the Lakers, the Clippers, to a degree, the Mavericks with Luka getting hurt, the Hawks with Trae Young getting hurt.
Yeah.
The 76ers and Embiid's knee. I think there were only a couple teams in the playoffs that didn't suffer from some type of injuries to a major player. And that was, maybe Portland, the Knicks. And then you look at the Suns, who even then they've had Chris Paul out at COVID. And now with the Bucks, Giannis, we don't know what he is going forward. But I think there's a lot to be said about this NBA schedule and the 72-day off season for the Lakers and Heat and shorter for other teams. But while the off season was short, and I think that should be a talking point, the regular season was way too compact. Like other levels of compact that we haven't seen before, where teams were playing back-to-backs, twice a week.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absurd. I'm really hoping they fix it next year. I hope they, space the schedule out more because while this Bucks Suns final is going to be very interesting, and we'll get into that more later, it really, really sucks that injuries, something that you can't control necessarily, but you can have a little bit of impact on, took out, so many top 10 players, top 15 players, top 20 players, just across the league. The biggest stars aren't playing on the platform of the finals because of injuries.
Yeah, and like you said, a lot of big names did go down. I mean, the team that potentially benefited from that, like you said, was the Milwaukee Bucks. And then the team they're facing with the Phoenix Suns, they played the Lakers in round one. Anthony Davis did not play for a good chunk of those games. Round two, they faced Denver with no Jamal Murray.
Mhm.
And then the last round against the Clippers, no Kawhi Leonard. So, like you said, a lot of stars did go down. And, hopefully the NBA does plan on going back to their mid-October start time for next season, just to kind of get everything back on track. But I
And
agree.
I'm fine with staying with the 72 games. I'm fine. Started in mid-October, make it go still till the end of like April. Do the 72 games. You don't need 82. I don't really see why there's even a reason teams should be doing 3 games in 4 nights. At this point, I don't think that should really be a thing teams have to do. And this isn't to take anything away from the Bucks or the Suns. Great on them. You can only beat who's put in front of you. Every year there's always something with injuries. And they don't make us really think differently. When Kawhi led the Raptors and how big of a deal that was, yes, Durant was out. Yes, Clay was out. We don't actively talk about that. No championship ring legitimately has an asterisk next to it.
Yeah, no.
You won a championship. You did what you came to do. You can only do what you can. And that's what the Suns and Bucks have done to this point. So good for them. I don't think anybody thinks that they are the 2 most talented teams in the NBA by any means, but they are the teams that put it together or overcame the injuries or, things of that nature. So congrats to them. Finals appearance is nothing, to sneeze at. It's something, it's legit. Everybody, only one team can win a finals every year. And if you're in the second position, you still did pretty good that year.
Yeah, and just to kind of look at the matchup, it's the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Phoenix Suns. Chris Paul is in his first finals ever, one of the best to really ever play. So it's awesome to see him there. On the flip side, Giannis has been a superstar that's been longing just for the opportunity to get into the finals, and now he is in. Will he play for the full 7 games, or however long the series goes? We'll see. But this is a Suns team that's filled with young talent. And you think 2 years ago when James Jones took over as the president or the GM, I mean, some of the moves he was making were a little strange, and he was getting made fun of for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Taking Cam Johnson at pick number what was it, 11?
11 or 13, one of them. I thought it was a good pick at the time, honestly. I liked Cam Johnson out of UNC. Sign it.
The first player from the process.
Yep, getting Saric was heavily criticized. Taking the flyer on Cameron Payne, people thought, get a legit backup. The experiment with Booker at point guard, which while it didn't work out, I think it did help his playmaking ability for sure. Taking Ayton when Doncic and Trae Young were there, but it all worked out. Even the Chris Paul trade was heavily criticized. Yeah. A lot of people thought that contract was so bad, which I've gone on the record and said, as bad as the Chris Paul contract is, as long as he continues to produce, you can't continue to call it the worst contract in sports. You can't do it. You can't say it's untradeable when the guy continues to put up numbers, continues to change cultures, and continues to help young teams. To this point, he's helped a young team all the way to the finals in what is now going to be probably his first, and I would, I'm going out on a limb and saying last chance for this finals ring that has eluded him. That, let's be real, if he wins, you forget top 5 point guard, you probably push him up into the top 3 discussion. And if they win, I'm going to assume Chris Paul is probably going to win finals MVP, or if they win, it is because of Chris Paul for numerous reasons. And the reason that they are in this position is because of Chris Paul. So it's going to be interesting to see who gets this championship and who solidifies their legacy, because I don't think next year, maybe only the Clippers, I think, can repeat to be in the conference finals. I don't think the Bucks are going to make it to the conference finals. I don't think the Suns, and I don't think the Hawks. This year is incredibly important to Giannis's legacy, to Drew Holiday's legacy, to Chris Paul, to Devin Booker, because looking to next year, Clippers are going to be back, Lakers are going to be back, Nets are going to be back, 76ers could make a move. The Heat are looking to do something always, obviously. The Mavericks are looking to try to get better. There are teams that are going to get better and have more wiggle room than the Bucks and the Suns. This is really both of those teams run for the year, and who's going to win that championship is going to leave a really big lasting legacy, because only one player in this finals has been in the finals before, and that's Jay Crowder.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only one. Everybody else is desperately fighting to get that first ring. If Giannis wins, first ballot Hall of Famer, obvious superstar, everybody considered him to be, even though the playoff struggles that have been there before. And then again, if Chris Paul wins, probably top 3 point guard of all time, you got to argue that. And then for Devin Booker, everybody who kept continuously calling him an empty stats guy, you got some egg on your face there. There's a lot of storylines in this finals that I think are pretty refreshing from a basketball fan standpoint, because next year is going to be different. So watching this year, you're really on the edge of your seat, because you also don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if Giannis is going to be healthy. You don't know what the Suns are going to look like next to the Bucks. You don't know what the Bucks are going to look like next to the Suns.
If for the Bucks, they need Giannis to play, hopefully all 7 if the series goes that far, but they need him for I mean, you can't roll out Bobby Portis in your starting lineup in the NBA Finals,
especially when his matchup if you're playing Portis, I mean, you're playing him at the 5 most likely, and if you're putting Portis on Ayton, I mean, that's a mismatch right there.
They could start Brook Lopez. The old,
but even then, I feel like if it's Lopez, they're going to drop coverage, which they did a lot against the Nets, and the Suns have too many shooters for that.
Happy for Chris Middleton. Very happy for Chris Middleton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris Middleton has taken a lot of criticism, and I'll be honest, I was one of the people that didn't think he was the right player next to Giannis. I didn't think he could hit that upper echelon, and I was wrong. He is their closer. He's the guy that they go to at the end of the game, and everybody, criticizes Giannis. He can't shot create, can't make free throws. He doesn't need to if he can carry them through the whole first 3 quarters of the game. And Chris Middleton can be the guy who does that, can make the shot creation, can make other players better. So no, Chris Middleton, I would argue, has been the best player for the Bucks through these playoffs, even with Giannis healthy. Yeah. Chris Middleton has been the thing. If Chris Middleton doesn't go off in Game 6 against the Nets, this doesn't happen the way that it does. If Chris Middleton doesn't pick them up in Game 3 and hit those big shots at the end of Game 3, because the Bucks would have gone down 3-0 to the Nets. Chris Middleton also helped them through Hawks games. He carried them for long stretches of the 3rd and 4th quarters when they needed him.
Now, for the Suns, this is a very, very young team. DeAndre Ayton, Cameron Payne, and then you have guys like Cam Johnson, like we said, and then Mikal Bridges. I mean, these are guys 2-3 years in the league, and now you're in the NBA Finals. So, do you think that's going to come into effect? When you look at the Bucks, Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, guys with that playoff experience.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be a factor, but I don't know. The 2 to 3 year thing is interesting because also on the other side, the Bucks don't really have those finals performers either. They have guys who've made it into the playoffs, but you know, we don't know if how the finals is going to affect these players. I am a little bit more worried about the Suns considering they have the younger team. But then the Bucks have the health question of even when Giannis comes back, how good is he going to look? And how healthy is he going to be? So I think there's questions on both sides. And again, both teams have never been here besides Jay Crowder. But Chris Paul has been in a lot of big playoff games. Drew Holiday's been in playoff games. So I don't think there's going to be a huge lack of not knowing what to do with that spotlight. I think both teams, I might give the slight advantage to the Bucks, but then again, you give them the disadvantage with the injuries. And then you talk about coaching, and the Suns definitely have that advantage. But then you talk about depth, and it might be the Bucks, and you can go back and forth on these teams, with so many different things. And that's why I'm really excited to see, the first game, see how they defend. I think Phoenix said, or Milwaukee said they're expecting a lot of switches from Phoenix. It'll be interesting to see if Milwaukee switches with them or if they're going to, try to hedge, see what they're going to do, because the finals, a lot more, I think, than people give credit for, is a series of coaching adjustments, more so than the first round or the second round of regular season. You're really relying on your coach to make adjustments, to know what to do. And while I don't think Budenholzer is as bad of a coach as people make it seem, he's certainly not a great coach.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he was coaching for his job if they lost the Atlanta series.
Yeah, no, and that's fair because, I mean, realistically, to go back to the Nets series, just because I watched that so heavily, they were getting killed on drop coverage from Brook Lopez. They were letting Kevin Durant, they were letting James Harden, they were letting a bunch of players switch onto Brook Lopez to where he would then go take 3 steps back and protect the paint. You can't do that against really good 3-point shooting teams. And the Suns have really good 3-point shooters. And then you also have Ayton inside. So they're kind of a matchup nightmare for them, because if Milwaukee isn't going to switch and they try to go into the drop coverage, they're going to be able to hit a bunch of threes. And then if they do switch and they switch, somebody onto Ayton, Chris Paul's going to know to drop that down inside into him. And he's become a much better post player. I think we've seen in the postseason that he has that ability to be that post player in certain instances. They're not going to drop it down into him, like Embiid, 20, 25 times a game. But you need a quick 5 to 8 post-ups a game looking for switches. You can do that. So I'm interested to see how Budenholzer is going to adjust to the Suns, because I know Monty Williams is going to adjust to the Bucks. I know Monty Williams is a good coach, not just because he won Coach of the Year. I knew he was a good coach before. I knew he was a good coach for the Hornets or Pelicans / whatever that was. I knew he was a good coach in New Jersey. He's a good coach. He took his time off and he went and did some assistantships and went to Oklahoma City and all that. And he's a good coach, and I'm expecting to see his adjustments really come through in the finals.
Phoenix does have home court advantage,
which I think is huge. The Bucks are not a great road team. You seen it in the Atlanta series, seen it in Brooklyn. They don't travel nearly as well as they are at home, and that's not on Giannis or Middleton or Drew Holiday.
Sorry about the technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. Jesse, you were talking about the Suns and their home court advantage for the NBA Finals. You see that having a big impact on the game?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen with the Bucks struggle on the road, in Brooklyn with Atlanta. A lot of role players. Giannis wasn't really affected, but Chris Middleton really was. You've seen his numbers at home versus numbers on the road. They were drastically different. Phoenix, I'm a little bit more confident in on the road with that veteran leadership of Jay Crowder, Chris Paul, Monty Williams is the coach. I trust them more than I think I trust the Bucks. So the Suns having home court, that's another thing in the long list that, you can chalk that to the Suns. And then there's, things on the other side, as I've alluded to. This finals could be, so balanced, and also we have no idea, it could be so unbalanced because none of us were expecting this matchup. We weren't, doing deep dives into how these teams match up like we were with, the Nets and the Lakers, which everybody wanted in the beginning of the year. We weren't really looking at this as a potential opportunity. So moving forward, we're kind of in uncharted territory.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Suns. I mean, at the start of the year, they were probably, you expect both LA teams better chance to make the finals. Denver definitely had a better chance, and then you probably put the Suns in that kind of threshold. Maybe you put the Mavericks ahead of them. So it's cool to see a new team, I guess, and with Chris Paul getting in, that's awesome. And for the Bucks, I mean, this has been a long-awaited opportunity. Like you said, this is probably the only opportunity you're going to have.
At least for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
Brooklyn's gonna. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm being a homer here, but you put those two teams against each other in a 7-game series fully healthy. I think the Nets win in 5.
Yeah.
The Bucks are not, to quote them, you're not that guy, pal. You're not. The Bucks aren't beating the Nets in a full 7-game series if they're healthy. And then pending on Philly's moves, Miami's moves, I really don't think they get out of the East next year or the year after.
Yeah. So to wrap up the NBA Finals, what is your official prediction for the whole series?
I'm gonna go Suns in 6. Giannis's injury is too much of an unknown for me. I don't know what he's gonna be when he comes back, because if he realistically, if he looks like how James Harden did when he comes back, he doesn't have what James Harden has on offense. He can't, stand and shoot. He can't dribble a little bit. His whole game is driving into the paint, either drawing fouls or making dunks or buckets, layups and ones. He needs to be able to get into that paint. He needs to be able to put his force on the game. And the Suns aren't just going to let him do that. They have a player in DeAndre Ayton who has shown rim protector capabilities and has really come into his own defensively this playoffs. They're going to have Jay Crowder to throw on him and be physical. Dario Saric is going to be physical with him. I don't know if that leg is going to hold up. And then you look across to the Suns. Yes, Chris Paul and Drew Holiday isn't a great matchup for you. Obviously, Drew Holiday's a really good defender, but I think the Suns just have more around the players that are going to have those bad matchups. The Booker Middleton matchup, I think that's a win for Booker. You look at how they've played coverage against the Nets, the drop coverage and the switching more so with Atlanta. Phoenix can kind of beat both of those. So I'm going to go Phoenix in 6, but I would not be surprised if it goes another way. Again, Giannis's injury, we really don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back.
Yeah, I also am going to say Suns in 6. It also does help that the Suns only played into 6. They won 4-2 against the Clippers, and then they swept the Nuggets in the series before that. So they've had a lot less games to play. Bucks went to 6 with the Hawks, went to 7 with the Nets. So I think that does come into a little bit of advantage. And like you said, the Giannis injury is very scary, and I don't think he's going to play game 1. I think he will be back for game 2. But if the Suns want to win it, they have to get – if the Suns take over 2-0 in the first 2 games, I think it's over.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Milwaukee needs to steal one on the road. And here's the other problem. If Giannis does come back in game 2, when does he not even just the injury, when does he shake off the rust? Yeah. That's at least a game or 2. So, let's say you play, or even if the Bucks somehow have to sit Giannis for the first 2 games, you're down 2-0 and you're asking Giannis to come back in game 3 and take back the series. I don't think that's going to go too well either. So, yeah, I agree. Milwaukee needs to steal one on the road, even just for the fact that if they steal one on the road, even best case scenario, if they can steal game one without Giannis somehow, and then sit him until game three with, they could go down 2-1, but having him back and having him healthy, that would be a dramatic game changer. But I think Phoenix is going to win. I think the home court is going to help a lot. And again, the biggest factor, that Giannis injury.
I do agree. Phoenix, I believe, will be taking the trophy. But going to the future of the NBA, the NBA draft lottery wrapped up a few weeks ago, and the Detroit Pistons hold the number one overall card, and presumably seems they'll be taking Oklahoma State guard Cade Cunningham. Now, Jesse, you are a future Detroit Pistons fan, as you've said in the past. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, to make the announcement, I will be moving to Michigan in the next coming month. So this is my formal notice that the Detroit Pistons will become my second team as I am moving there. This is huge for the Pistons. It really is, because I think a lot of people don't understand this Pistons team has talent. They had a second team all rookie in Isaiah Stewart. They had a first team all rookie in Sadiq Bey. Killian Hayes didn't get to play that much, but he was an interesting prospect last year. Jeremy Grant probably would have won most improved player every other year except for this one, with Julius Randle taking that and getting the Knicks to the playoffs. But this is a talented team and a GM in Troy Weaver that has done everything right so far. I mean, even if they had gotten the third or fourth pick, you're still looking at them as a pretty good team a couple years down the line. But with the ability to get Cade, and I think they absolutely are. I don't think there's a universe where they don't get Cade Cunningham. There's going to be smoke screens. There's going to be, they might trade down. They might do this. They might take Evan Mobley. They really like Jalen Green. They're going to take Cade Cunningham. He is the pick. He's the right pick. He's I think, the undisputed number one player in this draft. I think they're going to be a playoff team next year. I think they're at the very least a play-in game team. Looking at that roster, Dwayne Casey, who is a good coach, Troy Weaver as the GM, I don't think I can look at that team and say, there's going to be 10 teams better than them in the Eastern Conference.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly getting a number one pick always will speed up a rebuild. I mean, if the player works out too. But Cade Cunningham said he's only going to work out for the Pistons. He said he would only work out for the team that gets number one, and it is the Pistons, and they will be followed by the Houston Rockets, Cleveland Cavaliers, Toronto Raptors, and the Orlando Magic, with Oklahoma City sitting there at number 6. And this is a very unexpected team to get first overall, but they've been very poor the past few years. They moved on from Blake last year, a much needed move on that was. Like you said, Killian Hayes did get hurt, but he was still a top 10 pick last year. Sadiq Bey played really well last season, and Jeremy Grant is good. I mean, he was a monster.
He selected for the USA team,
Yeah, he was good on the Nuggets, and he chased the bag to Detroit. But anything else you want to talk about with the lottery? I mean, Brooklyn's sitting at 27. They may
that's going to get moved. No, it's going to get
up for number one.
Definitely get moved for a veteran. But I mean, cool for the Rockets. They're going to get their center for the future, and Mobley, I think they're going to take. And I mean, good for the Cavaliers. They're going to be in an interesting position, because if the Rockets do take Mobley, which I think they're going to, the next two players are Suggs and Green. Those are both guards. So Colin Sexton trade probably incoming. Who knows what Sexton's value is, because you also have to pay him. I'd love to see Colin Sexton on the Knicks. I think Tibbs would make him into like a top 5 defensive guard. Because he has all the makings besides the size, but Tibbs just knows how to make undersized point guards work. So I would actually love to see Sexton on the Knicks, but I think, and then you have the Raptors who jump up, obviously, and that's huge for them, because we don't know what direction they're going. We've seen some reports that Pascal is their franchise player. We've also seen reports that he might be on the trade block.
Lowry is probably on his way out, so they could
yeah, so they exactly. So they could opt for Suggs. Suggs seems like he really fits with Toronto and what they would want to do. A Fred VanVleet kind of style, undersized but really really skilled. And then you have the Warriors, sitting at number 7 and what was it, 13? 7 and 13, I think.
Yep.
So that's, I would almost assure, is trade bait. But what do they trade for? What's out there on the block that they can get? And also, not to criticize too much a lot of these prospects, the thing that really sucks for the Warriors is this seems like a top 5, top 6 draft, and they got number 7.
Yeah.
It was like the Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram year. You got the 3rd pick. It's like, congrats. You got the 3rd pick. It was a 2-player draft. So it's a thing of like, yeah, they got a pretty high lottery pick, but after Scotty Barnes, after Kuminga, kind of really falls off of that potential. So our team's going to realize that and reassess their trade value of 7 and 13. How much is Wiseman going to fetch you? Obviously didn't play fantastic this year, but he did get hurt. He was the number 2 pick last year. Yeah. So, there's a lot of interesting things looking forward to the Warriors in all of free agency, because you have Steph who, ideally will sign the extension. They think he's going to sign his extension. You have Clay coming back from not 1, but 2 serious major injuries in the Achilles and the ACL.
Yeah.
Draymond's getting older, but it still clearly shows that defensive prowess that he has. And then you have a bunch of young guys like Jordan Poole. They're bringing back Eric Paschall. I think he signed his player option. So there's a lot of things where the Warriors could either be a top 3 team again, a top 4 team in all of basketball, or there's a world where Steph doesn't sign his extension, Draymond ages another year, Clay doesn't look like the same. They maybe couldn't find a deal for 7 and 13, so they just had to draft 2 young players. I think the Warriors offseason is probably the one to look at more than any, because that's the difference between a finals contender and a team who is going into a full rebuild.
Yeah, and the NBA draft, do you know the official date of it? It's probably it's like July 31st, right?
Something like that, yeah.
I'm looking it up now, but I mean, like you said, July 29th is the first round, and Cade most likely going to hear his name number 1. Now, going to, before we end, there's 2 potential point guards that could be moved this offseason. Damian Lillard, I mean, he's a superstar. He's a franchise-altering player. They hired Chauncey Billups to be their new head coach in Portland, and reports say, again, Dame was not happy with how that whole process kind of went down. And, could you see Damian Lillard moved? And on the other hand, the Sixers were upset by the Hawks, and Ben Simmons did not perform well at all. Doc Rivers came out and said he is unsure if Ben Simmons could be a point guard on a winning team, and Joel Embiid kind of threw Simmons under the bus a bit. Do we see either of these 2 players being moved, both of them potentially?
I think Dame is going to get moved. He requested the trade. I mean, he didn't formally request it, but it came out through Chris B. Haynes, who, if you know anything about Chris Haynes, he is connected to Lillard. He's broken all of Lillard's stuff. He gets Lillard stuff before Woj, before Shams. He is connected to him. So if Chris Haynes is putting out reports that Damian Lillard is unhappy, it didn't come from a different source other than Damian Lillard and Damian Lillard's team. I think, now that being said, what team can put together something for Damian Lillard? Yeah. That's tough, because, a bunch of people want to say, oh, put him with LeBron and Anthony Davis. Kuzma, KCP, and a 2nd rounder this year and a 1st rounder in 2027. That's not getting you who I would say last year he was the best point guard in the NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the lowest you can possibly put Dame is top 3 or top 4. If you really want to have the Steph and the Kyrie argument, I would put him ahead of Kyrie. I would put him maybe only behind Steph. he honestly might be above Steph at this point. He is a legit top 2, top 3 point guard in the NBA. You need to give up things for him. Look at what the Nets traded for James Harden. Yes, the Rockets absolutely fumbled the bag with the players. They didn't want Jared Allen. They didn't want Karis LeVert. Nobody knows why. We don't know, but they didn't want those guys. So they only got Victor Oladipo, who they then traded. We all know the Rockets fumbled the bag.
Yep.
But the point is, they got 7 first-round picks, 3 unprotected, 4 swaps, or the other way around. Damian Lillard he's also on contract, by the way. Damian Lillard is on contract for the next 4 years, I believe, or next 3 years. He just signed that Supermax in 2019, I believe it was. So he's on for the next 3-4 years, making that high number. You need to give up assets for him. If you plug in your team to the trade finder and whatever you think is giving up too much for Damian Lillard, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not. This isn't, I think people really became delusioned by the whole Jimmy Butler trade and the Victor Oladipo trade and the old Paul George trade from the Pacers to the Thunder. We aren't in that NBA anymore. We're not in the Warriors are dominating, everybody is rebuilding NBA. We are in the NBA where stars and top 10 players require assets. Anthony Davis got you Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, another young player in Bonga who they moved on from. They
Josh
got
Hart,
picks.
Too.
What?
Josh
Hart.
Hart.
Yeah, Josh Hart. And then
a 4th overall
all of those picks. James Harden, 7 first-round picks. You aren't trading a top 10 guy in the NBA for Dennis Schroeder, KCP, Kuzma, and a first-rounder. If you think you're getting anything less than, giving up less than 3 first-rounders, I don't know what's wrong with you. You're giving up 4 to 5 first-rounders, probably an all-star level player or a young player you like, and probably depth to fill in the rest of the trade. That's why a lot of people want to say, the Lakers or possibly the Knicks. I mean, don't get me wrong. I liked what the Knicks did this year. I don't think the Knicks have the assets to trade for Damian Lillard and also be an okay team next year. I think the top 2 to top 3 teams to watch out for that can actually give up the assets. And I don't know if they would make the trade, but sheerly just assets. Philly, if Portland really likes Ben Simmons and they think a trade can be built around him. Denver, strictly for the fact that Jamal Murray probably gives them the closest resemblance to Damian Lillard, but he still makes Denver definitely better. They have to attach a lot of things, but Nikola Jokic and Damian Lillard are better on your team than if you have Nikola Jokic and not Damian Lillard. Yeah. I don't care what else is around him. Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, that's all fine. If you can get Damian Lillard, you get him.
Yeah.
And then, maybe Miami. They've obviously, they have the young ones. And then a team to look out for that could potentially do a deal if they really wanted to see how it worked is New Orleans. I don't think they do. Yeah. They could sign and trade Lonzo, add a couple first rounders, maybe give up Jackson Hayes or something like that. And obviously, I would assume Brandon Ingram might have to be in that trade too. So you'd have to see how that would work. But yeah, I mean, it's
not easy Lillard, to trade for a superstar.
Basically. Exactly. And you really need to have the assets. The only reason the Lakers were able to trade for Davis, they had a young core, they had picks, they traded all. LeBron came, they traded it all for Davis. The Nets, young players, had picks. Kyrie and KD come, they trade off LeVert, they trade off Allen. You look at these teams that make these trades, they're teams that have somewhat an establishment but need to get to that next level. I don't view a lot of teams as that. And ideally, honestly, I think Denver is the best fit, can offer the most things. But I don't know if that deal gets done. Simmons, allegedly the Sixers want to make it work with him. They were offered Brogdon and a first rounder this year from Indiana. They said that's nowhere close to what they want. I wouldn't accept the deal if I was Philly. I think I could get a little bit more than Brogdon and a first, but not much. The fact that they think this wasn't close kind of scares me because I think, are valuing him too much. An all-star caliber guard, which Brogdon has shown to be. He was the only real reason Indiana was in the play-in and everything, him and Sabonis, obviously. But he was, I think, the player that stepped up when they needed him to. You're not getting much more than that. You'll probably get an all-star caliber player, some teams who want to reshuffle the chairs. Portland might give you McCollum and a first or two.
The Timberwolves, I've heard, were interested.
The Timberwolves
I heard they really want Ben.
They might give you D'Lo and a first, but that's probably it.
But does Ben make your team better? I feel like D'Lo is better than Ben.
Ben makes your team better defensively, which is what Minnesota really struggles with. Also, I think Ben. Here's my thing with the Timberwolves fit. If you trade for Ben Simmons and you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, you're planning on playing Ben Simmons at power forward. You're not planning on playing him at point guard. You're playing him next to Karl-Anthony Towns so that Karl-Anthony Towns, who is the best shooting big man we've ever seen, period, stats back it up. He's like a 40% three-point shooter at 7 foot tall. He is the perfect fit next to Ben with the spacing because most of the time, if you have a center like Cat, who's that physically gifted, you're putting him in the dunker spot to clean everything up.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that with Cat. You can put Ben in the dunker spot. He fits next to him. It's not like it's, Clint Capella or Jared Allen or these guys who need to be in the dunker spot. Cat offers a different thing there where Ben can mostly just control the paint. And I think that fit would work really well. That being said, I don't know if it raises their floor that much because for as great as Ben Simmons is on defense, he obviously leaves so much to be left on offense. And we've seen D'Angelo Russell get hot on offense and really take over games. And having two ball handlers of Edwards and D'Angelo Russell, being able to pick and roll those guys with Karl-Anthony Towns, being able to send all these different ball handling combinations at you. I do like that more than the Simmons fit personally, but I could see why Minnesota wants to do that. I think Portland, if they can keep Dame and convince him, again, Ben would be playing the 4. He would be playing it next to Nurkic, which is a lot less good of a fit. But I think the argument for Ben to be a championship point guard, I think we got to let that ship sail unless he develops a jump shot. And obviously that's always going to be the asterisk, but I don't believe that Ben Simmons is a championship level point guard. He could be a championship level power forward, send him on short rolls, really work to his game, run in the fast break, one-man transition. I mean, transitionally, Ben Simmons is one of the best players in the NBA. In transition, he is fantastic. Defensively, he's fantastic. Playmaking-wise, he's great. It is the shooting and the half-court offense that really hurts him, and he needs to go to a team that is going to make those possessions easier for him.
It's going to be a long, long offseason ahead, and this isn't the first time we've heard the song and dance with Dame Lillard being unhappy and not being involved in decisions and him wanting out, but then nothing's ever turned into anything. So we'll see if actually things come into fruition now and he does get traded potentially to a contender. We'll see. But one thing I wanted to ask you before we end, we all know how incredible Trae Young was this playoff run. And I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen recently people saying maybe the trade wasn't that bad between them and the Mavericks, with the Mavericks getting Luka, and maybe Trae is up there with Luka now. Do you think this is true? I'm not buying into it. This is
so
recency bias.
Ton of recency bias. Don't get me wrong. Trey is an all-star level player. He is fantastic. Trey is great at what he does. The biggest thing he has over Luka is players seem to really enjoy playing with him. Yeah. Luka doesn't have the style where players, I think, really enjoy playing with him as much. That being said, the Hawks roster, the Mavericks roster, that's night and day. Those are two entirely different things. The Hawks built a good roster. The Mavericks, quite frankly, did not.
Nope.
But the only reason the Mavericks are that good and can get to the playoffs and can push the Clippers as far as they possibly can is because of Luka. I think Luka is the best player at his age that we've ever seen. He's 21 or 22 now, I think. Doesn't matter. He's either the best 21-year-old or the best 22-year-old that the NBA has ever seen. He is better than LeBron at his age. He is better than Jordan at his age. I mean, the only one you could maybe argue was better at his age was like Magic Johnson. He is so good for the age that he is. And somehow I feel like because we criticize them so much, they've kind of gotten away with this. If anybody lost that draft, it is the Sacramento Kings. I mean, being able, they selected number 2.
Yeah.
They selected 2. And they went with Marvin Bagley. I mean, you could look at, the Suns probably should have gotten Luka. Yeah, DeAndre Ayton's worked out, though, for sure. And they're going to the finals.
Who was number 4 in that draft? Because 3 was Trey or Luka.
Jared Jackson Jr.
Okay.
Good player. Good player.
Solid. Yeah.
Can definitely develop more. Injuries really hurt him this year as well. He's going to turn into a good player. The Kings allegedly can't move Marvin Bagley. He's a negative asset at this point. Which, by the way, coming out, it wasn't a direct comparison, but on 4-point play, I did say Marvin Bagley reminded me a lot of Jahlil Okafor. Can't dribble with his other hand. Couldn't pass out of traps. Had a lot of things that worried me, but the athleticism seemed to make up for that. But he really hasn't put it together. But don't get me wrong, Luka, Trey, both are phenomenal. Luka is unquestionably the better player.
And I mean, if you remember last year in the bubble when Jamal Murray dropped the 3 straight games of 50 points, people were saying, "Wow, maybe he's kind of like a top 3 point guard."
Yeah,
it's all just recency bias. I mean, Trey's good, but I think to say that he's up there with Luka is wrong.
If you put Luka on that Hawks team, they beat the Bucks without Giannis for sure.
Yeah,
I think undoubtedly in my mind. Now, to be fair, Trey was hurt.
Yeah,
but I've seen Luka hurt and I've seen Trey hurt, and Luka is the better player hurt.
Yeah. And just before we wrap up, just to talk about the head coach hirings, like we said, Chauncey Billups is now in Portland. Former Net legend Jason Kidd taking over in Dallas.
Terrible hire.
Reports say Carlisle and Luka kind of hated each other a little bit.
Well, that's the problem with Luka too, is people don't like him is the thing. Apparently he's incredibly immature, and reports say he's very full of himself, and Kristaps doesn't like him. Then again, Kristaps isn't really happy ever anyway, but and didn't develop into the player next to him that he should have been. But there are multiple reports that players don't like Doncic, so I don't think it's crazy to think that Carlisle doesn't. Kid's a bad coach. That's all I have to. He was a bad coach with Brooklyn. He was a bad coach with Milwaukee. I don't know why he's getting another chance this soon.
Yeah. He replaces Rick Carlisle, and Rick Carlisle gets a job pretty quickly with Indiana on a 4-year contract.
And that's a great hire. Rick Carlisle was probably the best head coach that's hit the open market so far this year, by far.
And then we remember the Boston Celtics shakeup. They hire one of the Brooklyn Nets 15 assistant coaches with Ime Udoka. I mean,
good coach. Coach. He's a good player development guy. He's going to work a lot with Brad Stevens. I think that's a good hire for them. I think Udoka and Stevens are going to fit well together. And thank God they fired Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge had a job way too long, man. Way too long. He fumbled what should have been an absolute championship gold hand with that Nets trade. fumbled it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Nets are the better team at the end of that trade.
Yeah, funny enough. So we will see how the NBA Finals plays out. We'll do a NBA Finals recap at the end of everything. But Jesse, thank you for coming on tonight, and have fun in Colorado for however much longer. You'll be back in Jersey. But make sure to follow us on all our socials: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Sports Depth Pod. That's Sports DEPT Pod. We have a MLB Subway Series and All-Star Series podcast coming out very soon, along with probably an NHL podcast and more wrestling podcasts, because wrestling never stops. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.